episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. It is not just a tagline, it is our reality day in and day out. Steve Cohen booking the best guests in the genre. And today we're about to dive deep into Diddy land, which can be a scary place. But Sean Diddy Combs, he made his first appearance today before this new federal judge, and he got a court date. A trial date. He has a trial date, and we're going to discuss that time frame that he has before the trial starts. They also discuss certain deadlines that will help sort of build the framework for the trial itself. Without further ado, a first-time best guest from the Miami area, Chris Lomax. He is the managing attorney at Lomax Legal. He began his career with the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice over a decade ago. Soon established a stellar reputation for taking on and winning complex and difficult cases in jurisdictions across the nation. So welcome to Chris Lomax.
Thank you.
Jessica Mishali, you know the name, you know the face. She's been on. She practices out of Boca Raton, Florida. And she most recently got Marsha Thompson in this very high-profile case, a non-guilty verdict in using a defense, battered spouse, that Sarah Boone is about to try to incorporate in her own trial, which kicks off Monday. So we will get Jessica back once we're in Sarah Boone territory. And last but not least, he is an American badass. His name is Robert D'Amico, the founder of Sierra One Consulting. This guy chases pirates through Somalia when he was part of the FBI. He chased drug lords that were cutting off their legs to escape him and others. And we welcome Rob back. So let me just start with a super wide open macro question. Chris, your first time on the show, haven't really gotten your perspective on this. When you first heard this news about Sean Combs, the raid and then ultimately the indictment and then him going to jail, what was your reaction to such a big, A-list celebrity sort of facing this incredible demise?
My reaction was that it's a groundbreaking indictment of someone who all of us who sort of came of age in the 90s and the early 2000s looked to as one of the existential sort of examples of the hip hop culture, of music, of fashion, the arts, someone who we had an opportunity to observe on reality TV. And I think some of us took issue with the way that he treated people and handled certain situations. And so after seeing that sort of shocking video of what he did to his lover, it did not shock me at all that there were countless other people who provided testimony and provided information regarding him engaging in actions that have been now alleged to be criminal. And so I was not surprised. I was not shocked, but I was a bit surprised to see the government go after him with such aggression and the level of certitude that they did. So here we are. He has now got a trial date. He's moving forward, and he has to face the music.
Just to follow up on that, since I am a actual reporter in my real life, you just said something interesting. Why did you not think that the federal government would go at it with this level of aggression? What do you mean by that?
Well, I think we've seen in a number of occasions where people who are high net worth individuals or folks who are celebrities have been accused of things, and they are treated with a little bit of a different approach than people who are without resources and without means. And Mr. Combs, I think, got a bit of an experience of an everyday person, where the full-fledged power of the United States Department of Justice and all of its tentacles were able to reach out and touch him, since we're in the music space. And so I did think that that was something that was a bit different from what we've seen in other circumstances. He wasn't able to buy his way out of this or negotiate his way out of this or use his resources to backdoor a way out of this. He has to face this head on, like many other folks who we have encountered either in our work or in our personal lives.
So we, are finding out today that the trial date is now set for May 5th. Today is, I don't even know what, October 10th. Justin Mashali, what about that time frame? It seems quick for a defense of this magnitude, and they say that there could be more victims, many more victims coming forward. Do you think that this date holds, or is it just kind of a placeholder for right now?
I'll say a placeholder. I can't imagine that this defense can be completed and ready to go to trial. That being said, as a criminal defense lawyer, I also know that any defendant who's in custody, especially people who are not used to being in custody, and I think in this case, Mr. Combs is facing something in his every day and every night that we here cannot imagine, right? And so he's going to be pushing. He's going to be pushing his team, and I'm imagining he's hired a team that just drops the rest of their lives and any other cases they may have had, and they just do this case from here on out. But there's also the government who has to be available, and there's also the witnesses who have to be available. So I'm going to say it's a placeholder.
There you go. We're going to see. We're going to find out. And there's obviously multiple hearings to come in federal court before that trial date, which is in May. The government here, of course, just to take a half step back. First of all, Sean Diddy Combs pleaded not guilty to these very serious charges, including racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking charges that date back to, I think, 2008, although apparently Diddy's been up to no good since the early 90s, 91. But Rob D'Amico, you're retired FBI agent. The government in this indictment is essentially accusing Diddy of using his music empire to engage in this sex trafficking and this pattern of abusing both men and women. I guess it was kind of surprising to find out the extent of the men because of this new press conference that Tony Busby had last week. He's the Houston-based attorney who now says he's representing 120 more victims, and it goes right down the middle. 60 of them are men. 60 of them are women, which surprised a lot of people. These are, alleged victims. But Rob, for the government to kind of make this accusation that Diddy was using his music empire, from your perspective as a guy that used to investigate crimes like this, what would they have to really show or nail down to make this a valid and clear point in court?
I think his enterprise is everything. And they're going to show that he would invite victims to the music studios and get them lured in that way, and use all kinds of different promotional things to get access to the victims, to use them, in the parties and stuff. So I don't think it's going to be hard. They're just going to have to do it succinctly because I think it's so vast. It's one of those things. But he used his popularity and his fame to get him, and it's just going to be a matter of talking to the witness and how did they get close to him, and it was this event and that he was hosting this, and if he was doing these, he was definitely setting them up so that he could actually use them to get the victims. So when you have predators like this, and any of the things that we talk about, to get close to the victims that you want, you set things up, you set parties up, you set events up to get access to them, and then you have your handlers bring them away and serve them the drinks and get them to the point where they're also probably testing them too, in such that do they talk at all, or how's their demeanor. They get better and better at picking the better victims, so to speak.
That's upsetting to hear, but I guess it's the truth. Please put in triple Q's, all caps, if you have questions for the esteemed panel. And I was telling Chris before we went on camera that it says it right behind me, best guest, but a better community, very engaged community. A good question from I'm So Tired. I always feel that name because I go through most days this way. What would the government incentive be, Chris Lomax, to do this other than that they believe P. Diddy is a massive criminal? Is there some ulterior motive or reason that the government has behind this?
Well, this sounds like a setup. Seems like you want somebody to come raid my house from the government to try to attribute something other than fairness, justice, and equality to the government and their pursuits. But to be fair, when I was a DOJ prosecutor, I don't recall there ever being a time when our motivation was anything other than to get down to the truth and prosecute someone for something that they actually did. Now, I can't speak for every prosecutor in America. I can't speak for the current administration. I was there at a different time. Obviously there are plenty of things that I don't know about what's happening within the government. But I do know that the government does not usually spend its time chasing after folks who didn't do anything and they don't have any evidence when they're going to spend all these resources on something like this. If you were to say that he was a local guy who, distributed marijuana and he had, pissed off somebody in the local government, maybe they wanted to go after him and teach him a lesson, that's one thing. But this is a pretty massive and substantial case. And so there's evidence that we've already seen that I think would lead us to believe that Mr. Combs has engaged in some criminal conduct. The way that he acted towards his former lover violently is criminal. And so if the government has access to that and they begin to dig deeper and find more and more and more information, they don't need any motive other than purely pursuing justice. And so I'm not aware of anything beyond what we've seen in the evidence that would motivate the government to pursue Mr. Combs.
Yeah. Real quick, by the way, I should have mentioned, obviously our thoughts are going out. Too many people died from the storm yesterday. Ironically, it was mostly from tornadic activity. But here in Miami, and I think where Rob is a little farther north, and even in Boca, it wasn't so bad. Hit the west coast of Florida. Also, Chris is in Miami. So anyway, our thoughts are with them, and these storms seem to be getting more frequent and worse. And there's something bubbling in the Caribbean, but I hope it goes away. That is for sure. Real quick, Chris. So we discussed this with Rob, who's on the panel yesterday, and then I promise I'm coming back to Jessica. But there's been such a big rumor mill out there. But one of the things that's kind of been spinning around is that Diddy was an FBI informant. And since you worked in the DOJ, Rob kind of quashed that whole idea yesterday, and he gave his reasons. What do you think about that supposition that's been out there?
I haven't seen or read anything that would suggest that Diddy was an FBI informant. He certainly did not conduct himself in a way that most FBI informants would. And so I would say I disagree with that as a general premise. But again, I'm not on the inside. I just haven't seen anything that would give me reason to believe that that's true.
Hey, Chris, Suge Knight is the one who put that out there. So I think,
There you go. I mean, I think that says a lot. We had to
so
consider
you might want to
the source.
reassess that. Yeah. It's a guy in jail for murder.
Right.
By the way, Chris Lomax, how does Suge Knight have a podcast from prison? It's called Collect Call with Suge Knight, and I guarantee you he's got more viewers than me. How are you allowed to do that out of a prison?
Well, you're asking whether he's allowed to do it versus if he's able to do it. If you've ever spent any time in prison, you will find that a lot of things that you may think are not allowed actually happen on an everyday basis. I think actually one of the guys who is intertwined with Mr. Combs recorded part of a song from prison at one point. So there have been plenty of albums and records recorded from prison, as long as you can gain access to the equipment. If you can get on a telephone, I know that folks have cell phones. You've heard about these burner phones that are inside the jail. You can do pretty much anything you want to do.
There you go. Steve
Cohen,
Cohen,
giving some zig to the guards for his sponsorship and everything else.
Yeah, exactly. Steve Cohen is on a collect call with Suge Knight right now, trying to get him on the show. We'll see what we can do. So Jessica Mashali, part of the indictment, and then we're going to go into break down what happened today, and then we'll go back to the past a little bit. But part of the indictment basically says that Sean Diddy Combs lured his victims by promising romantic relationships before then using threats, intimidation, and abuse to get them to engage in various sexual activities. This is now more commonly known as the infamous freak off or freak offs. I'm just thinking ahead to, a jury trial here, and this notion that he was luring these victims with these false hopes. It's, like particularly disturbing. How major? I mean, he's got tons of problems, but how big is this problem?
I'll say that's the least of his problems. Again, I'm your criminal defense lawyer. I see things from a criminal defense perspective. I see no crime in men implying or even straight up offering a romantic relationship. That's kind of basic what you deal with every day out there, right? I mean, that's what women are encountering every day from everyone. You mentioned and you asked the question, like, is the government targeting him for anything? So when you see a case like this, there's going to be some blame thrown here, right? I think it's more so going to be at the victims. And I think it's going to be along these lines of people who were doing this wanted to do this. They wanted to be partying with P. Diddy. They wanted to be at a Diddy party, right? They wanted to be at a freak off. They wanted to be part of this. They wanted whatever comes along with being part of this. And then they regretted it, right? So that's what you're going to hear on that end.
Yeah. Rob D'Amico, I'm always curious about like weird things. Like, how do they move Diddy? I know they ushered him through a side door, but from the MDC to the Manhattan Federal Courthouse, can you tell us how a person that high profile nature, who number one could have means to somehow escape, or number two have enough people hating him that they could take a shot at him? How do they move Diddy from Brooklyn to Manhattan?
You do false movements. You have one crew that thinks they're going to do it, and then you actually have a crew that does it, and they're used to moving mobsters and other folks around. And then you get lost in traffic. So it's one of those things that you probably, like I said, you stand up a crew that thinks they're going to do it, and they actually take a prisoner that's not him, and then you have something ad hoc right after that actually moves them, type of thing. So it's just a matter of keeping things quiet and compartmentalized between even the guards, because you really can't. They're going to call like, "Hey, guess who I'm moving?" type of thing. So you keep everyone in the dark.
Wow, that's see, I find that very interesting.
Now the federal marshals do it a bit different.
Yeah,
but I don't think on the federal side you have the same worries that you do on the state and locals there.
And do they put a vest on him underneath his prison
I'm
garb?
Sure. It just, they're going to do everything safety wise. Like, you're not going to take any shortcuts with this one. Everybody knows that you don't want to be the one that something does happen to. So everything's going to be, done per the manual, every safety regard out there.
All right. Hey, Rob, I think there's a little pop on your audio, so I'm going to have you mute yourself when you're not speaking. It could be me. Sir Barry, back to Chris Lomax. If this is so big and expansive, another great question here, why only one person indicted so far? The Epstein case, 2 people were indicted. We know how that ended up. By the way, shout out to Black Widower. Look at how generous this is, 20 surviving survivor memberships. But go ahead, Chris, why only one indictment so far?
We actually have no idea who the government has brought in as a subject in this case, because all we see is the public indictment. There could be a number of other people who the government has already approached and entered into agreements with to cooperate and eventually enter publicly filed guilty pleas. And so I think we're too early on in this case to say one way or another whether somebody's been indicted or will be indicted. You need witnesses to make a case, and usually a lot of the people who are the closest witnesses are folks who are actually involved in the same criminal conduct. And so I'm sure there are a number of other co-conspirators who've been named in the indictment, who've already been approached by the government and who have agreed to cooperate, will eventually plead guilty or not. Maybe they've been given some other deal that will allow them to not take a plea, but a lot of them will plead guilty and testify against Mr. Combs if he goes to trial.
And Chris, do you think, I mean, I'm not going to say the names because I don't want to have to hire you when I get sued, but I've said them before anyway. But Are we going to see bigger names than Sean Combs dragged into this? I'm trying to figure out a way to say his name without saying his name.
I think I know
Yeah.
who you're talking about. But I would say if I was a betting man, no. I think that Mr. Combs is the top of the ladder here, and that the other folks that we see eventually come into the case will be lieutenants and sergeants. I don't think there's some bigger general out there besides Mr. Combs. This is about his enterprise. It's about P. Diddy and everybody who fell under his quote unquote leadership, if you will. That's how this case has been presented to us, at least so far.
By the way, I can tell Chris Lomax is a best guess, a keeper. We're going to keep this guy around if he'll come back after this. We haven't gotten through the show yet, and you never know what can happen with me. So we'll see. But isn't Diddy's team, I like the two T's instead of the D's here, pushing the speedy trial rule? You know, the defense did make it clear, Jessica, that they want this to happen quickly. How does that dynamic play out? Because if you're Diddy and you're sitting in that horrible MDC and you're used to having, you know, everything at your beck and call, he wants out of there obviously immediately. But how do you balance that with being able to prepare enough?
It's really tough. It's one of the toughest parts about doing this kind of work. And it's particularly tough where you have someone who's stuck in custody. I would say step one in cases even as serious as this is to try to get the person out of custody for the reason of being able to properly prepare the defense. On the other side, if he has some patience, but also he has to have some understanding and foresight. And what we say is like, we have to have a little bit of a come to Jesus with our clients pretty quickly about what they're facing and what the evidence probably is. I don't think that he wins anything by rushing this case. The government is not coming out against Sean Diddy Combs unprepared. They are way more ready than he is. They have been preparing during the investigation. They know this case. They know what they're dealing with. They have the evidence. It's him who is now taken by surprise and has to figure everything out and how to defend himself. So I don't think it's a good move for him to push on speedy trial.
There you go. And Chris, I mean, Jessica makes an amazing point. I think the federal conviction rate is like 98%. You were in the DOJ. Does Diddy even stand a chance? I mean, he's got deep pockets, but they're nothing compared to the federal government.
Everybody stands a chance. How good of a chance? We can talk about that. But look,
the 2%.
Exactly. That 2% may be enough. I'll take those odds.
Diddy's a 1%er right now, but he's hoping to be a 2%er.
The closer you are to being a 1%er, the better shot you have of filling that spot. So Diddy has enormous resources. He selected an attorney who he believes, I'm supposing who he believes will put him in the best position to be successful here. There are people in the community who are skeptical of the federal government right now and always. There are people who are looking to walk somebody in a criminal case for whatever reason. So anytime you line up in front of those 12 to 14 people who are sitting in that box, there's a shot that it can go the other way. And you have to be very sure that you've gotten your evidence and your ducks in a row. If you're the government, you have the burden of proof. You need to prove every count of the indictment beyond a reasonable doubt, right? That's your job. And if you go in there with a presumption that you should just win because you're the feds, well, you may have a different thing coming. My wife is an assistant federal public defender, and I've been here plenty of times when she's come home and said, not guilty, right? So it happens from time to time, or a hung jury. Now, I won't tell you how many times she's come home and tell me the other thing, because then I won't be able to come back on the show.
Yeah. How come she's not a best guest? We're going to get her on next.
Well, yeah, listen, I can hook you up. She's one of the best at what she does.
All right, please do.
And so what I'm saying is that there is no guarantee here for the federal government, especially when you have someone who has so much recognizability and so many resources. You may liken it to the OJ trial. Some people thought that was a guarantee, but you go back and you dissect it and you see what the DA's office did and some of the mistakes that they made, and that glove didn't fit. And so it had to acquit, right? That's a possibility. You cannot take anything for granted. I think about it with football. Alabama probably thought when they played Vanderbilt that they had a 98% chance of victory. But guess what? they took that goalpost and dumped it in the river in Nashville.
By the way, they're selling pieces of that goalpost on eBay. I was reading. I was tempted to buy a piece of that. Jersey Girl. By the way, I do own a piece of the UFC. I'm a huge UFC fan, and got a little piece of the Conor McGregor octagon canvas after his fight. So I will give that to my great grandkids, and it'll be worth 21 cents then. Jersey Girl 51. Jessica Mashali, and then I'm getting back to Rob D'Amico. Do they have to finish the federal case before they can start civil cases? Again, this guy, Tony Busby, is kind of leading the charge out of Houston. He's a personal injury attorney. What's interesting, he says that he's already settling cases with big name celebrities, but he's also promising to name celebrities. But what about the the nexus between civil cases and criminal cases?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, I practice here in Florida, but you would not have to, meaning people can initiate a civil case. It doesn't matter whether there's a criminal case open, a federal case, a state case, whatever case you have grounds to file in whatever courtroom that is, you can go ahead with it.
By the way, before I forget, Sunday night, we got 3 former inmates coming on. We're going to do a special show Sunday evening. We're going to talk about Diddy's life right now in jail, because we got some more information about what he's doing every day. And these guys are super interesting, and they've all been behind bars, so they're going to come on and talk Diddy. And by the way, we're staying on Diddy no matter what. But Sarah Boone, who's accused of this horrific crime, zippering her boyfriend into a suitcase and watching him die. The trial starts Monday. Should I go or should I stay? Let me know in the comments section. But right now, I've got a room booked, and I'm planning to go and be there for the trial. So let me know what you guys would like me to do. Rob D'Amico, what is the likelihood that famous predators are going to be outed here, unlike the ones in the Epstein case? I mean, it's interesting, they say, well, he's the Black Epstein. He's going to be, taken out in jail or prison, whatever. Do you think, Epstein was playing with some of the most powerful people? We're talking about, leadership, world leaders, things of that nature, where this is more probably celebrity based, even though we don't know the details. Is there more of a likelihood here that we hear big names than we did with Epstein, where we heard virtually nothing?
I think you're going to hear some, but then again, I think, some of the folks that he's around, or some of the folks that may get brought into this, probably have more connections in the prison than some of the folks that Epstein had. Like, the gang populations in prison are substantial, and a lot of the people in this community have been in prison or have ties to prison. So I think he needs to be in protective custody the entire time he's in there. Just, like I said, I don't believe in the whole conspiracy things. I shake my head a lot of them with Epstein and stuff. I think he just felt, hey, his life as he knew it's over type of thing. But I think P. Diddy has some worries, and he knows who can get indicted in this. And he's probably thinking about that now, and probably thinking about the ties to the prison community they may have.
By the way, Lee made a good point. Ask the COE. Chris, that is the chief of everything. My wife, who runs the show, former CBS News correspondent. So she's the executive producer here. But she's basically, she wants me out of the house. So she's telling me to go. So I will probably end up listening to her. So one of the interesting things, not that surprising today, I refuse to sing "Should I Stay or Should I Go?" But one of the surprising things here, not surprising, I should say, is that Sean Combs' family showed up. You see Diddy's mom here, Janice Combs, who's been very vocal. His daughters, twin daughters, showed up. His son, Justin Dior Combs, another son, showed up. Chris, obviously they love their father. It's a weird thing. But is this also, did the defense, do you think, encourage this in terms of optics to make, because they're talking about how he loves being a father, what a great father he is. What part of this is his family sincerely caring and making sure he's okay versus lawyers saying, come here and make sure that he looks good?
I think it depends on whether we're trying the case in the court or we're trying the case in the public. I don't think that's going to make much of a difference in the courtroom because there's no jury. This is just a hearing before a judge. The judge is not going to be swayed at this juncture by the appearance of family members. I think he knows Mr. Diddy has familial support. He's not a stranger off the street. Any person can look up on Wikipedia the names and the ages of every single member of his family. So we don't need to see his family at a hearing for the court to understand he has familial support. Now, on the other hand, if we are talking about a public trial where jurors are going to be selected who've been exposed to media and have an opportunity to digest information about Mr. Combs before they are seated as juries, then if I am the defense counsel or if I'm someone who's a PR person, then I absolutely want it to appear that Mr. Combs is beloved by his family members, that he's not estranged, that he's not someone that they are afraid of, because Mr. Combs has been made to be out to be a boogeyman. Like, he's been made out to be a boogeyman, a bad guy, a terrifying guy. And so if we want to try to minimize or mitigate some of that media, then we have to bring in some people who are going to make him appear to be a father, a family man, a loving guy. So I think maybe there are some efforts on both sides of his team, the legal team and the media team, who are advising him and his family members on how to proceed here.
But I think also, though, being a good father and being a horrible person are not mutually exclusive. The mob guys I was around, some of them were very good fathers, probably not good husbands, but good fathers. And they murdered people and they sold drugs to kids, you know. But in their, it's a duality of personalities and stuff. And he may have been really good to his kids, but I guarantee he separated it, and they might not even understand this part of his life. So I don't think it's something that you can say, hey, they knew and they're just doing this to support him. They just may know a better person than any of us do.
And I think that's a good point. You know, like, we have Collier Landry on the show. His father murdered his mother. It was a big high-profile case called A Murder in Mansfield. There was a documentary about it. And he says, you know, he still loves his dad, even though he knows his dad is basically a psychopath and a sociopath. But and look, I have Kerry Rawson on, who's the daughter of the BTK serial killer, and she's super conflicted. And, you know, it doesn't get any more evil than a convicted serial killer, especially the way he did things. So, you know, Diddy is very likely a horrible person, but maybe a decent dad. Who knows? I guess we're going to find out. Chris, this is your world as well. Why is Diddy being tried in New York City and not in LA or Miami, where he has residences and where those raids took place?
That was the government's choice. You know, there are various jurisdictions where he could have been tried. I think that New York is probably ground zero, for lack of a better term, for his operations. And since they're making this out to be an enterprise-based crime where he's charged with all kinds of RICO violations, and that everybody in the organizations that he runs is part of it, and they're giving him all of the tools and resources that he needs, New York City is sort of the epicenter of the crime. He's from there. His operations were set up there. Like many celebrities, he has a home in Miami and LA, but New York is where it all began and where it all sort of functions. I think that's why the government chose New York City, but they could have chosen a number of jurisdictions where crimes were committed.
I don't want the COE to get upset here, and this is a super chat. This was paid for. This is why I'm bringing. Otherwise, I would never bring this up. But from He's a Doll, bought the book because you're smoking hot. I'm blushing right now. Devoured it cover to cover last night. Just sent my mom a copy. Beautiful, loved it. For those who do not know, it is a running joke on the show, Chris. I wrote a book about my mother. She's a child Holocaust survivor. It's like 15% Holocaust stories and 85% her yelling and cursing at me and giving me life advice. So it is a book that will definitely change the way you look at life. And He's a Doll. Thank you very much. I appreciate it greatly. Jessica Mishali, you jealous, COE? Don't be jealous, COE. Court of public opinion, Jessica Mishali. You heard Janice Combs, his mom, say he's already been convicted. And look, I mean, it's an avalanche. We're doing shows on this every other night. Every media outlet is. He's feeling the heat. Has he already lost because of what's happening around him?
So that's a tough call. Part of me wants to say yes, right? I see the case as done, right? If you want my opinion on what's going to be in the case is done. But if I'm him or I'm his defense team and I'm figuring it out, I think that his trial in the media starts now. And I think it's hugely important. His children showing up to everything, every child he has, every friend he has, anybody who can support him to be there matters. And it matters a lot. The way the media is going to see him right now, you mentioned it's the case that I just did, the Marsha Thompson case. That's the first case I ever did where the entire trial was televised and all the pretrial motions. And it brings so much into it, right? It brings so much into it that everybody is watching. It's really hard to believe that the jury is completely sequestered from that information, no matter what their situations are. They know what's going on. I think if the defense team can soften him in the public at all, can soften this blow, and how they're going to do that, I don't know, but they have a ton of money and a ton of resources. They need to think of a way to do that. They need to think of a way to change this a little bit in the media before they even think about what they're going to do in the courtroom.
Rob D'Amico, this is your world. It just popped in from Die Abyss or D Abyss, however you want to pronounce that. D won't make it to trial. Diddy. Did Epstein make it to trial? Feds and Secret Service both owned the diddler. He doesn't even know which side to play against the other. He's a distraction till he's useless. Sounds conspiratorial, but what do you make of this comment, Rob?
I'm not even sure where they're going with that. I mean, it's the whole conspiracy thing, and he was owned by both of them. It's so easy to throw that out there, and then just when you throw evidence back at them that it's not true, they say, "Oh, that's just part of conspiracy." I had, one clown tell I was just a mouthpiece for the Bureau on here. I guess you don't listen because I'm certainly pretty hypercritical of how things are happening across the government and stuff. So it's one of those things like the conspiracy, like, oh, he's owned by them. Like, come on. I don't know what he would have been able to give the Bureau, the DEA. He was running the drugs. He was doing all this. Who's he going to be giving? Cartel people? No, that's not going to happen. The cartel will kill him in a second. It's one of those things like you have to look at what would this person be in a position to give the government? He is the biggest player too. So I can't see any. There's a couple people that would be bigger than him, but it's not like he was brought into that world. So he has no value at that point. Like he can tell about sex trafficking. Well, he's the ringleader of sex trafficking. So it's one of those things that it doesn't sell to me, but everyone who's outside it doesn't know how this stuff works can just throw that out there. Same thing with JFK and all the other assassination attempts that people, throw in there, and then they just constantly use one bit of thing to say, hey, it's conspiracy.
Yeah, it drives me crazy. It became political, and I'm not going to get into it, but we all know. And Rob, people basically, lost. I don't know. The FBI to some people lost the mystique it once had, and I'm sure it drives you nuts because Rob is a guy that was just trying to, I know this firsthand, just trying to uphold the law and do the job that he was supposed to do.
And one thing I do think that the thin blue line culture needs to change. Police officers want to get recognized for all the great things they do, and they do great things. In that case, then you have to admit when you have bad cops, and there are bad cops out there. And you can't just say that we're going to turn their back on them. So I've been on other podcasts and other things just ranting about, hey, look, if you want to get the credit that a lot of them deserve, you have to stop saying, hey, we're not going to snitch on another cop because it's a thin blue line. You should be the ones who ultimately raise your hand first and say, this guy's doing this. But it's a culture that has to change that way.
And that's I'm glad you bring that up. And so whoever says that Rob's a mouthpiece, obviously he is not. Christy Wolf here. Joel, do you think you'll go out to New York for the Diddy trial? I'm going to crash at Steve Cohen's place. He just doesn't know it yet. He's got a place in the city. And yeah, we'll go. There's no cameras, so it's tough. And it's going to be a crazy, crazy media crush. But I think it'll be really interesting. So we're going to cross that bridge when we get there. Just to fill in some of the gaps from today, when Diddy entered, Sean Combs entered the courtroom. It was through a side door. He was wearing kind of a tan jumpsuit. He reportedly smiled and waved to his son, King Combs, who was in the second row. Justin Dior Combs, as I mentioned, was in there, as well as the twin daughters. He appeared before this judge, this new judge, whose name is Arun Subramanian. He hugged his legal team. We were talking about this yesterday. By the way, the previous judge had recused himself. I thought it was a trial date conflict that he had, but it was he had a kind of a relationship with some of these attorneys, and he recused himself. He didn't want to have a conflict, which we just saw in the Donna Adelson case. But Chris, talk about the difference between federal court versus state court. I mean, they don't mess around in federal court. Rob was kind of talking about this yesterday.
So most people, when they think of federal court and the differences, I would say it's just a much more formal environment. There are a lot of rules. There's a lot of decorum that you expect to see in federal court, not as much of the antics and the high-flying theatrics that you may see in various state courts. There are U.S. Marshals everywhere, and the security measures in the courthouse are a little bit tighter than what you see. For example, if you're not an attorney, you can't bring in a cell phone or an electronic device. In fact, if you are an attorney, you can't even bring in a laptop or an iPad without filing a motion for permission to do that. So it's a very tightly run operation in federal court. A lot of times federal judges even have people go with them to protect them when they go out in public because of these reasons. So it'll be very orderly. There are going to be a lot of motions decided on the papers without oral argument, as opposed to state court where you have to go in all the time and argue everything in front of the judge. There's specific deadlines that will have to be followed, whereas in state court, you have a little bit more leeway. But more than anything else, I think, there's a very public and accessible docket that everybody can go pull from and read everything that's been filed almost instantaneously, unless it's filed under seal. So it's an interesting place to be. I love being in federal court. That's where I started my career, but state court is just as good. They're both places where you can find justice no matter what side you're on.
There you go. Peggy Riordan, Rob D'Amico, this is your world again. P. Diddy was charged with under RICO charges, which is racketeering. This is what they use against the mafia, right, Rob? And this is what you had investigated in your career.
Yeah, we talked about it last night. It's an enterprise, but it takes other criminal activity to support that. So when you see the arson and the violence, that they're all contributing overt criminal acts in support of the enterprise. And it's big because you don't have to prove that he did everything specifically. He gave direction and orders to do it through his enterprise. So that's a big thing that how they got Gotti and all these other folks that weren't out doing it. They're getting money kicked up, but they're having their people do it. So again, I think that's where they're going to need some of the witnesses to cooperate. So they may be taking plea deals, but they have to connect. They have to get witnesses that say, hey, he told me to do this, this, and this. And then they'll show how it supported this enterprise that he was in charge of.
Iris Hewlett with a very important and interesting point. Jessica Mashali, she's talking about consensual versus coercion. You keep hearing that Diddy forced these people to do this, but also people were like, hey, everyone wanted to go to a Diddy white party. at one point. So she says consensual versus coercion, very difficult to prove without admissible evidence. I wonder why witness protection program wasn't used by the alleged victims. Rob brought this up yesterday. I think it came up that some people might be under the witness protection program right now. What do you think?
I think it's definitely possible that they are. I think consensual versus coercion, I mean, that's the whole idea of the case. But when you look at the facts that we know, the facts that are kind of already out there, and I mean the government's facts, right? They're yet to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. But, you know, people might choose to go to a Diddy party. I don't know that anybody's choosing to be drugged and have any and every act committed upon them while they're unconscious, right? That's a little bit harder to prove that that is something that is consensual. So with regards to what evidence will be admissible and what won't, that's yet to be seen, but the regular rules will apply. So eyewitness testimony is always admissible, right? Mm-hmm. Something that somebody sees and comes in to talk about. And lay people always think that testimony is not evidence. They're looking for physical evidence. They're looking for DNA. They're looking for photographs and videos. But some of the most compelling evidence is actually just witness testimony. And it sounds to me like the government has witnesses, or they wouldn't be here. What I see as a big difference between federal and state, and I won't practice in federal. We always talk about how I like to win, and I like to win. So I don't practice in federal court. I've been there, I'm licensed, and I've been there a couple of times where it related to a state client who needed me, but I won't go there. And one of the biggest things I see is they are so prepared by the time they file the case. There is nothing left for them to do. Whereas in state court, I can jump in, I can find so many problems. The police investigation is a wreck. They don't know where they're going, what they're doing, who's the witness, what are they going to say? Right? They don't know. But in federal court, they know, right? They have this already.
Wow. I love how competitive it is. It's interesting to people outside the law that it's about winning and losing. It's also obviously about justice, but Jessica does not like to lose. Cindy Neufeld, by the way, my 5-year-old was playing t-ball today, and I told my mom, I called her frantic. I want this kid. He doesn't have that killer instinct yet. I wanted him to take his cleat and step on the other kid's leg or something, but he's not doing that. He's too nice a kid, and I'm gonna have to toughen him up. But I'm hoping it's just because he's 5 years old. Who knows? But he's a sweet kid. Why are the appearances in court drawings? They are sketches. That is because there are no cameras, so they make sketches. It's kind of old school. I kind of like that part about it. Imagine having like a Diddy sketch. That'd be pretty wild to have. So, Chris, back to you. Today they also set deadlines for lawyers on each side to submit arguments. What are these arguments? What are we expecting? Kind of the next steps in this ongoing legal battle.
So I'm not sure exactly which deadlines these folks are talking about, but I know that there was a filing today about the government purportedly leaking evidence, and the defense wants to exclude that evidence. And I'm thinking that the court must have set some deadlines for when full briefing needs to happen on that, so that arguments can be held before the judge if necessary. So the implication of that motion essentially is to say that if the government has violated the rules in terms of grand jury secrecy and leaking information that was procured through a grand jury subpoena or through the grand jury process, the defense is arguing that that should be excluded from the trial. Now, we saw this huge and very prejudicial video of Mr. Combs, and the defense would be very fortunate if that is not admitted at trial. And so this is a step in that direction. I think there are other things that may have been released at some point that the defense wants to exclude as well, but I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, so let's pick up there because Chris is absolutely right. This is another major headline. Obviously, the trial date set now for May 5th for Sean Diddy Combs, but the other really big piece of news is late last night, Diddy's defense team filed a motion accusing Rob D'Amico, accusing your not really you, because I think
HSI.
HSI. It was HSI, you're correct, of leaking this video. What do you make of that?
Well, I think the government's response was they didn't even have the video in their possession at the time of the leak. So I think that if that's the case, that would be easy to prove when they actually took that video from whoever. So if they prove that they didn't have it at the time, and then someone from the hotel or whoever leaked it, there's also a couple other ways to tell as soon as. If it's a digital video, there's markers on a digital video that you could figure out if it came from that source or not. So it's called hashtags and stuff. So there's definitely ways to figure that out. But it's one of those things like, hey, let's give it a shot. Let's say they leaked it and let them prove that they didn't, so to speak. And if they can get it thrown out, great. And if not, they tried.
So we're not showing the video because it's obviously very triggering, but I did ask the COE to pull the still. This video was surveillance video from 2016 that was leaked back in May to CNN. And this is the video, of course, with his then girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, where he just beat her up. And it's all captured on video. And it was shortly after this that you saw the raid on the two homes. Jessica Mishali, again, the defense is asking the court already to suppress this. They don't want this video in as evidence. Obviously, it is incredibly damning. The federal government saying it's a key piece of evidence. What are the chances that this video gets suppressed?
I haven't heard any grounds for it to be suppressed. I don't think that the fact that it was leaked is enough for it to be suppressed. I'm not saying that they did leak it, and if they did, I don't know who did it, but I'm not sure that that would even be enough. Obviously, the video is extremely damaging. It's upsetting to watch. It's very uncomfortable to watch something like this. And anytime you get to that level, it really, I think, would appeal to the jury, and it would be very strong evidence against him. I don't think it's going to be suppressed, but I'm not sure what other grounds they may have for it.
The defense, Chris Lomax, wrote, and I'm reading a direct quote from the motion here. The videotape was leaked to CNN for one reason alone: to mortally wound the reputation and the prospect of Sean Combs successfully defending himself against these allegations. I mean, this is the job of the defense, right, Chris?
Yeah. The defense has an extremely difficult job in this case. And so I expect them to use every opportunity available to them to poke holes in the case, to try to create an environment where there's distrust of the government, right? To say that, oh, this is not about Mr. Combs' conduct. This is not about Mr. Combs and his colleagues engaging in criminal conduct. This is government overreach. The government has not played fair or played by the rules from the very beginning, right? That's the narrative that they want to build as maybe even a subtext to the primary defense, whether he did it or not, whether people were there consensually or not. Well, put all that to the side, and I want you to think about how the government behaved in this case. So it could be used in some ways to distract attention away from Mr. Combs' conduct and point the finger at the government and say, these are the guys you got to be worried about. Right now, it's Mr. Combs' video that they're leaking. Next, it'll be your video. Next, it'll be your brother's video. Next, it'll be your text messages. So be aware that the government does not play fair. Don't let them do this. Acquit Mr. Combs and let's all go home. That's where they're going with this.
Chris, Sunshine in the chat just asked, is this the biggest trial of our lifetime? I can tell you, I remember OJ very well, which was a 9-month trial. How do you answer that?
For some people, it may be, right? Our lives overlap in different ways. So I think when the OJ trial happened, I was a kid, right? I wasn't a lawyer. I was following. I remember the Bronco chase, watching that whole thing, not understanding the greater implications of what it meant for our society and culture. I mean, there were lots of different implications in that case about race and policing and so many things that have since, caused us to rethink how we view society. Here, there may be other narratives around the way that abuse occurs, and sexual abuse, to be specific, the way that people are being taken advantage of with sexual identity. So I think it depends on the lens from which you view this case and where you are in life, what's important to you. I think it's certainly going to be a watershed moment for our country because he is such a huge celebrity, and the things that we've seen him do are so horrible that we cannot ignore them.
Well, I hope it helps with celebrity worship, because everyone worships these celebrities. They don't really know who they are. So I think that's a cautionary tale at the very least. But the government fired back, Jessica, basically saying, look, this whole idea that the government leaked it is, there's no good faith basis in that statement. That's what they said. And then they went and kind of took a shot at Diddy and said, Jessica, it was not until the video surveillance footage of the defendant's attack, this is the Cassie Ventura, was leaked to the media months later that the defendant was forced to admit that he had in fact perpetrated the disgusting attack. So they're basically saying, look, he never would have admitted it if it wasn't for this video coming out. They make a good point, I think.
I mean, the first thing I tell anybody I ever meet is never admit anything. never talk, never open your mouth, never say a word. So, I mean, I would think somebody who is, educated and represented correct is not going to admit to committing any crimes.
Let's watch this because I think our memories are short. This is Diddy a little bit after the Cassie Ventura tape came out, and then we'll have Rob react to this because Rob's used to dealing with criminals and bad guys. Let's take a look.
I was up. I hit rock bottom, but I made no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video.
That's kind of the shortened version and a little low audio. Apologize there. But Robbie basically said, I effed up, said it multiple times. It seemed to be all about himself.
I effed up and didn't get that video out. Like, I didn't buy that video when I could have. I effed up. I got caught. I'm reading this line by line that my PR person wrote. He has no remorse. None. He's mad at himself for getting caught and doing it stupidly, where a video got him and he didn't go down and pay the clerk $1,000 to take the VCR tape out. I'm showing my age by saying VCR, but that's what he's upset about. And he's reading that, and there's no emotion. He's not genuine in that as he's talking. Like, if I was interrogating him, there's nothing in there except that he's memorized what he wanted to say.
A couple more things to go over. I always get worried with the first time best guess because we usually go about an hour and 15. So a few more minutes, but we're learning more about what Diddy's doing behind bars. The New York Times, the New York Post are actually doing some good reporting on this and getting sources within MDC. They say, Chris, that Sean Diddy Combs has spent the 3 weeks in jail speaking with his defense attorneys, preparing for his case, and receiving visits from his family. The source said his family is visiting. This is a direct quote. He speaks to his lawyers. Those are the only visitors he has. He needs to focus on his case. That is all he is doing all day long. Do you believe that, number one?
I do believe that, because my understanding is that Mr. Combs was placed in the SHU, which is the special housing unit, which essentially is solitary confinement. And as much as we have remorse regarding that video and all the horrible things he's been accused of, Mr. Combs is still a human being. And living in solitary has been demonstrated through many studies to be a debilitating condition for any human being to experience. It can lead to suicidal thoughts and all other mental health issues and otherwise. So I'm glad to hear that he has interactions with other human beings, from his family, from his lawyers. But given his celebrity and his own safety, I think they took those measures to protect him. When you're accused of sexual crimes, of violence like this, you are in danger in jail. Inmates do not take kindly to hearing about rape and allegations of violence against women or kids or anyone else. But we still do have to consider his humanity, and that he has human interaction. That's an important feature for any person to live.
Yeah, we're going to have again Sunday. We're going to do a special show with 3 former inmates to talk about, Diddy's state of mind in there. Rob, how do you think, you've dealt with all these bad guys? How do you think he's doing behind bars? And, Chris just said he could be a target, but he could also be deified in there and become like an idol to some. What do you think is happening on the inside?
I always told people, like, I arrest a lot of guys, like, gang members, and some of them got into shootouts, but a lot of them, when you had them, they just gave up easily. They knew the system. Nothing was a shock to them. They knew they were going to make an appearance. They're going to go in. They're going to see their buddies. It's their second or third, fourth, fifth, sixth time in prison. To them, it's their world. Hey, I got caught on this one, and I'm going to do this, and I'll be out, type of thing. When you go arrest, and I did it down in Coral Gables and all around South Florida because of white collar crime, when you go arrest a doctor who's living in a $20 million house and his robe alone costs more than all your suits that you've ever bought to be a federal agent, and all he's heard is about bad things in prison, his world is ending and is crushing, and he is more desperate than the gangbanger who's very used to the system. So I always say, and same thing when you're arresting pedophiles, and we, God, what year was that? 2021, 2 federal FBI agents were killed by a pedophile who basically ambushed them. And I think it was all based on, they knew their life that they had is going to end. Everyone in his world didn't know he's a pedophile. He's going to jail. He's heard that everything happens to a pedophile. He's never been in the system. And he just wanted to go out. So I think, I'm sure, Sean Combs has a thing at a hotel, nothing less than 1,000 thread count sheets. And he wants this kind of water and green M&Ms and this and that. And now he is in prison, and it's looking bad that he's never going to get his green M&Ms and his 1,000 thread count sheets again. And then the lack of human interaction to be able to talk to someone, vent, and everything else. I think it's dangerous for him and his mental stability, but I also think the prison population, I think you're going to have supporters and you're going to have people against him too. If he ever get into the general population, I think it's very dangerous for him. The prison gang system is just unreal. And I think he could find alliance, but I think he would be in a lot of danger. So it's his world is nothing that he dreamed of. And I think they keep saying that he's not a flight risk because he voluntarily went to New York. I think his lawyers told him to do that because I don't think they ever thought that they were going to deny bail, especially what he can put up. I think that was the surprise that, okay, go turn yourself in and then you'll get bail. It's going to be a lot of money, but you're going to get it. I think that's what the big surprise was to him and his legal team.
Yeah. And by the way, big shout out here to the best mods, Frankie Figs, Julie Frew, Gen X to the 7th power, formerly Gen X Granny, Copper Horse, and the best name in all the YouTube, Shaquille Oatmeal. They don't get nearly the credit they deserve is what I'm trying to say. So huge shout out to them. Space Coast on the West Coast, Steve Cohen for booking the best guests in true crime. And of course, the COE behind the scenes. If you're enjoying the content or appreciate the content, please hit the like button. Please subscribe. Please tell friends about the show. Was his third attempt, by the way, COE, please. I don't like green M&Ms. I like blue M&Ms. Please have a bowl of blue M&Ms on the nightstand tonight. Was his third attempt at bail denied? So Jessica Mishali, I don't understand. I'm not an attorney, the inner workings, especially the federal court system. But this new judge basically notified the defense that he wasn't even going to handle a possible bail hearing because it was already decided by the previous judge, and it was stated in court today he is not getting out of jail before this trial. Is that any surprise?
I'm not surprised, no. I think these charges are serious. To me, it's kind of a no-brainer that he's a flight risk, whether he turned himself in or not. Things change as it moves along. Donna Adelson was trying to get away, and everybody talks about that. And there's been a lot of situations where people come, but I think if they had an opportunity to change their mind and go back and just leave, they probably would. The way it works here, I can tell you for bond is that, yeah, you can ask multiple times, but if there's no change in circumstance from the time that a prior judge said no, or you were told no, there's not going to be a bond, then you're not entitled to another hearing. You have to show that there's something different. I'm not sure what he could possibly show would be different, and that would be in his favor at this point. So I don't think he's going to have a bond.
And even though it was $50 million, they still said no way. I guess he could be a flight risk. There's all kinds of talk going around that he could still escape. Like the crazy helicopter flying into the yard, whatever it is. He's stuck in jail right now. Angie, with this question, Chris, this is putting the cart ahead of the horse a little bit here. By the way, Chris, does the federal government ever, will they ever cut a plea with a guy like this? Does that happen?
Well, he always has an opportunity to plead guilty to the indictment.
I'm talking about a deal, like a plea deal.
Well, look, if he does in fact have some information that he can offer to the government that would be valuable in preventing the commission of further offenses, then sure. But I don't see the government bending over backwards to try to cut a deal with Mr. Combs in this circumstance. I think that's highly unlikely. Is it possible that he could get a deal where he drops a couple of counts? Maybe he caps himself out at 30 years instead of going to jail for 50 years, right? Mm-hmm. If he's willing to go to jail for a substantial period of time, I could see that, because again, you don't want to risk that 2%. The federal government does not want to have a trial and lose that case. If you lose that case, a lot of credibility will be destroyed because you had so much evidence, you had the video, you had so much time. So I talk about it all the time. I say a bird in the hand. If he's going to take a guilty plea in a case like this and walk himself into federal prison, hey, by all means, we have secured some form of justice and put somebody behind bars who's a danger, probably for the balance of his life.
He needs his own John Gotti. When you give Sammy the Bull with 19 murders a plea deal, the only one reason, because Gotti got out how many times, acquitted.
Mm-hmm.
So he needs someone like that, and I don't think that that person's out there, actually.
Rob, I was going to ask you, do you recall a massive federal case that the feds lost?
Yeah, they're out there. I'm trying to think of one offhand, but like you said, when the FBI can bring an investigation to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they don't like it, it's not boxed up and wrapped up pretty enough for them, and they're like, yeah, we're not going to bring it to trial. It's because they don't want to lose. It's one of those things like, oh, that one's got a little bit of whatever. And then when they do decide to go, like you said, she said, they're so prepared. They have all the manpower in the world. They have everything that, I know, like I said, Sean Combs is going to pay a lot for this. I mean, as he should, because it's his freedom. But you still can't compare that to how many people the federal government can put on something. If something comes in at the last moment, they can throw 100 people on something. You're talking about New York. The agents up there in the U.S. Attorney's Office, it's just free work. There's no overtime even. They just grind.
Wow, that's crazy. You said that last night. No OT. It sounds like TV news. They just torture you. By the way, it's kind of hilarious. Everyone was screaming, why would CNN throw Anderson Cooper into the middle of a hurricane with projectiles flying at him? But that's his job. So better you than me, Anderson. From Angie to Jessica Mashali, this is putting the cart ahead of the horse for sure. But potential jurors in this case, wouldn't the feds dislike hip-hop fans because of, violence is, I guess, part of some of the lyrical aspects of hip hop? How do you pick a jury for this case is the bottom line.
So I'm a big hip hop fan. So are my little kids. We just love it. We'll say anything if it's in a hip hop song. So no, I'm not going to hate on hip hop lovers. I think if I'm the federal government, this is the easiest jury selection I've ever done in my entire career. Anybody with any amount of humanity does not want to see this kind of violence. Nobody wants to see violence against children. Nobody wants to see people, violated in the worst way against their will. Nobody wants to see this sort of abuse of power, right? Nobody wants to see this. It's going to be hard on the defense team. I don't know who they're going to choose, right? But if I'm the federal government, this is a very easy jury selection.
There you go. Yeah, I heard it there. Corey Love to Chris, and then I promise we're going to get some final thoughts in just a moment. Why did the judge mention the lack of a bail application if bail was off the table? Chris would understand this a lot better than I would.
Well, that's a little bit of mind reading. I'm not really sure what the judge was looking at. I would assume that he's saying, well, you didn't apply to me specifically for this relief, and so I'm not going to revisit a ruling that was made by 2 prior judges if that's what you're asking me to do. If you had some specific, as Jessica mentioned, new information that you want to present to me that has not already been presented, then I'm happy to hear that. But I'm assuming that the judge is saying I'm not going to revisit the same thing that's already been decided.
Yeah. I'm kind of belaboring this point, but Jessica, back to you on this. I was reading some of the more unseemly details, and I'll spare you a lot of them. But one of the things that the government talked about in the indictment is, of course, drugging victims during these freak-offs, and they surreptitiously film them. It said right now that one of these is being shopped around. Who knows? But they said that the physical exertion during these freak-offs was so intense and harmful and damaging that not only would the victims, but Sean Combs would often have to have IVs after the fact. That just kind of blew my mind because it's so insane. I mean, how do you get around this with a jury if this gets admitted, which it almost certainly will, right?
So you're not going to like what I have to say.
Here
comes criminal defense lawyer. I'm saying this helps P. Diddy, right? The fact that he himself needed to have this treatment, and that his, so-called victims do too. This is the freak off. This is what it is. This might not be what you're into, right? But people are allowed to be into what they want to be into. And people were attending these freak offs. They wanted to go to these freak offs, and he was treating them and helping them for whatever they needed. Hydration, 100 pounds of lubrication or whatever he had, baby oil in his house, 1,000 bottles. He was providing whatever they needed. He was taking care of them. I realize that a lot of people are not going to buy that, but I think the stronger evidence is where people were drugged and things were done to them that were completely against their will. And obviously the strongest evidence is people who were underage.
Truth seeker human here, wondering if Diddy and his crew hit any bodies due to blank, fill in the blank. There's talk, Chris, that Kim Porter, a woman he was connected to, that she died and died very young. Are they going to go back now? I think I asked Rob this last night, but are they going to go back and look at any deaths that happened around Diddy and see, if there was something more sinister behind them?
I don't see why they wouldn't go back and take a look at it at the very least. I'm not sure they'd spend a whole lot of time and resources on this, but if there's enough smoke, then I would presume that the government is going to try to run down any level of criminal conduct by Mr. Combs at this point, now that they have this trial coming up.
By the way, it's not that I hate Anderson Cooper. It's just that he's been in the business for 30 years, and it takes 9.5 news cycles for him to ask a question. Like, at least get it down to 7 news cycles before he can get the question out. And maybe it's a little jealousy on my part that the guy's got like a $20 million a year contract. And his mother was Gloria Vanderbilt. Anyway, I digress for a quick moment. Rob D'Amico, love having him on. That's your new title, Rob. He is the American badass. He is the founder of he's the founder of Sierra.
I know true American badasses. I'm not one of them.
Chris, Rob and I were at lunch, and I hope to take you to lunch one day in this area. But
please.
Basically, it was me and Steve Cohen, the 2 bravest people on earth, and I started asking Rob questions. What do you do if a shooter comes in here right now? And Steve Cohen and I couldn't get to the back door fast enough, tripping over each other. And D'Amico's like, "Oh, I would just pick up this glass, throw it at his face, pick up the shard, and jab it in his throat." I was like, "Oh, okay, there you go."
That's what I would do.
I need to hang out with Rob.
Yeah. So that's he is the founder of Sierra One Consulting, FBI agent, and of course, former member of the military, serving the country for just about 40 years. Rob, what's next for Diddy in this case?
I said the court movements that they put out there. I think the selection of the court date, they said they want it sooner, but I think that's a move to get information and then to delay it at a certain point. So I think it's a political move. I mean, it's a legal move by his team in order to get certain things, and then they're going to start pushing it off too, because again, I think they have more work ahead of them than the government does.
By the way, Anderson is no Peter Tragos, coming from Ned Smith. One of my all-time favorites is Ned Smith with a dry sense of humor. I tried to check in on Peter, but I did see on Twitter he's in the Sarasota area. That was hardest hit. He looks like he's doing well in his family. I sent him a note. I have not heard back, but I do hope that he is okay and he gets back on the YouTube very soon. Jessica Mishali, she just won a very high-profile case with a woman named Marsha Thompson, where the battered spouse syndrome was used. She's, as you can tell, a criminal defense attorney that does not like to lose. What are you sort of anticipating next with this Diddy saga, Jessica?
I think that he'll continue to try to get out of custody. He'll do anything and everything. So I think we're going to see more applications for bail. Those are going to be ongoing. I think his lawyers will be at the jail with him every day, keeping him sort of entertained. He's not going to want to be alone. He's not going to want to be around anybody else. He definitely can't be in general population. He has to look out for jailhouse snitches. Anybody who he would befriend him and would be nice to him or would align with him is actually a risk and a threat. And I think that these months are going to kind of fly by really quickly, and they're going to be asking for more time to prepare.
Jessica, do you think, don't be immodest, that you could get Diddy off?
No.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer.
Sarah Boone's a different story. Sarah Boone should have come to
$5 million to try.
Donna Adelson and Sarah Boone, they made a big mistake not coming to me. But
yeah, what's the matter with them? Well, I don't know what's wrong with them. Analytical Blarney AB, Keith Morrison is the real silver fox. Ain't no denying that. That's my throw pillow. Keith Morrison. He is the OG of true crime. He's going to be our new OG of best guest here, Chris Lomax, the managing attorney at Lomax Legal. By the way, I tweeted you out, Chris. I don't know how active you are on Twitter. Sure. He is a formidable defense attorney. And as we found out, his wife, what is her first name, if I may ask?
Her name is Boomy.
Boomy?
Yeah.
I love that. How do you spell that?
B-U-N, N is silent, M-I.
Oh, very cool. What's a derivation of that?
Nigerian.
Nigeria. I love it. By the way, we have a Nigerian contingency on this show. They come in and watch from Nigeria.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, which is awesome. So please connect me with your wife, and I'm going to get her on the show as the best. Maybe we'll have both of you on at once. How is that? You guys?
We'll try. She's not as much in the public sort of discourse as I may be, but we can ask. All we can do is ask. Look at that. That's the spelling. Great job.
There you go. There you go. So, Chris, final thoughts here. You were once part of the DOJ. Mm-hmm. Does Diddy stand a chance? How does this all end?
Everybody stands a chance. He just stands a very, very small one. That's it. That's all I got.
There you go. I love it. Lee T, I hope Chris isn't afraid to come back after seeing the pillow. He did look a little scared. He doesn't know me that well yet. But will you come back, Chris?
Absolutely, I'll come back.
All right.
I enjoyed the conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. So listen, tomorrow, special time, 4 p.m. Eastern time, we are going to have Phil and Scott, America's most respected detective, and the FBI, Scott Duffy. And they're actually going to break down the Sarah Boone police interviews, COE. We're going to need that. And the responding officer to Sarah Boone, COE. We're going to need that. And then that's it. I think I'm going to head to Sarah Boone land, and we'll cover Diddy and whatever else breaks from there. Until then, love you, America. Everyone here is in Florida. Love you, Florida. We all survived the hurricane, but love you everywhere else, including the Republic of Ireland, my good friend Black Widower, the UK, Australia, Nigeria, Tanzania, all these places. Love you all. See you tomorrow, 4 p.m. Guest, stick around 1 second.